the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Farm Service Agency. Heather Boyd is the program leader or director for the Non-Insured Disaster Assistance Program. Most of you may refer to it as NAP. She is going to go over the provisions of that program and answer your questions as well. Then we'll follow up again with USDA folks. We're going to talk a little bit about the loan programs that they have available through that agency. And I believe that Patricia Sorensen from the agency and Jim Boyd will be here as well to talk about that. Then we might take a few minutes break and then move on to our representative from the Small Business Development Center. All right, Heather, I got to mic you up. And this is not good to put on. That's why I'm holding it. But you might want to get. So, I'm an oyster.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Like she said, I'm Heather Boyd. I work with the USDA Farm Service Agency, Florida State Office in Gainesville. I'm the program specialist for the NAP program. I also have a couple other folks here with me. Tom Hawkert, he's the farm program chief, and Mark Carlton, district director, and Melissa Rogers, CED for Wakulla County and other counties. So I'm going to just do a basic overview of the NAP program, which is the Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance Program, and specifically speak about aquaculture and clams and oyster coverage. Everybody hear me? Okay. All right. NAP provides financial assistance to producers of non-insurable crops to protect against natural disasters that result in lower yields or crop losses or prevents crop planting. NAP is subject to adjusted gross income provisions, which means an individual or entity, their average adjusted gross income cannot exceed $900,000 to be eligible for NAP payments. There's also a payment limitation associated with NAP. NAP assistance is limited to for crops with basic coverage, $125,000 per person or entity, and for crops with buy-up coverage, $300,000 per person or entity. And you'll hear me just say the word value loss crop a lot in this presentation. Aquaculture is considered a value loss crop with the NAP program. Eligible producers. The definition of a producer for NAP is an owner, operator, landowner, tenant, or sharecropper who shares in the risk of producing an eligible crop and who is entitled to share in the crop available for marketing from the farm, or who would have shared the crop had the crop been produced. Landlords, landowners, landlords, tenants, contract growers, or anyone else not having a valid ownership share of a crop and who do not share in the risk of producing the crop are ineligible for NAP. So you must have risk and ownership in the crop to be eligible. NAP only covers certain eligible causes of loss. So the eligible natural weather events for aquaculture crops are damaging weather, including but not limited to drought, hail, excessive moisture, freeze, tornado, hurricane, excessive wind. And we also have related conditions. These related weather conditions have to be in conjunction with the primary weather event that I just went over. And these are excessive heat, insect infestation, disease, or any combination thereof. And please note that oxygen deprivation is not an eligible cause of loss. The damaging weather or natural occurrence or related condition must occur during the coverage period, before or during harvest, and directly cause, accelerate, exacerbate destruction or deterioration of the crop. So coverage levels for NAP, we have basic and buy-up, which were both authorized by the 2018 Farm Bill. For value loss crops, basic coverage covers a loss of value in excess of 50% of the total value of eligible inventory at the time of the disaster, and it pays at 55% of the average market price. Producers can elect buy-up coverage at 100% of the average market price in the amounts of 50% to 65% and 5% increments of the lesser of total value of eligible inventory or the maximum dollar value for coverage sought. The producer, when you sign up for coverage, you are responsible for determining the maximum dollar value you'd like to insure. Along with purchasing or buying coverage, you have to pay a service fee. This is a non-refundable fee. The service fee or request for service fee waiver must accompany the application for coverage, which is the form CCC 471, in order for it to be considered filed. The service fee is $325 per crop per administrative county, up to $825 per producer per administrative county, and not to exceed a total of $19.50 per producer. The service fee can be waived for producers who qualify or meet the definition of socially disadvantaged, beginning farmer or rancher, limited resource farmer or rancher, or veteran farmer or rancher by filing the form CCC 860 when you're applying for coverage. Premiums. Premiums are associated with the elected level of buy-up coverage, and they are in addition to the service fee. For value loss crops, the premiums are calculated based on the maximum dollar value for which coverage is sought, subject to the applicable payment limitations times 5.25% of the premium. And the way premiums will be calculated are you take the product of multiplying the producer's share times the maximum dollar value times coverage level times 5.25%, and that would be your premium. If a producer qualifies for a socially disadvantaged, beginning farmer or rancher, veteran farmer, or limited resource, they are eligible for a waiver of the service fee and a 50% premium reduction. And the maximum premium a person or legal entity can pay for NAP would be $15,750. That's based on the $300,000 payment limitation. Oop, I guess I'm turning it. Eligible aquaculture species. They are any species of aquatic organisms grown for food or human consumption, fish raised as feed for fish or are consumed by humans, ornamental fish propagated and reared in an aquatic medium. To be eligible for NAP assistance, eligible aquaculture species must be raised by commercial operator on private property or in water in a controlled environment. For private property, for the producer to be considered eligible, the producer must own or lease the property with readily identifiable boundaries. Owner or leasee has total control of the waterbed, the ground, under the specific type of water, and does not have control only over the column of water. NAP assistance for value loss crops is calculated based on the loss of the value at the time of each disaster. Losses are not cumulative. It is important that a loss of value of any portion of the inventory be determined only if that portion of the inventory is not marketable now or in the future. So it has to have zero value for it to be eligible for loss for value loss crops. To determine the value of the crop immediately before the disaster, which is the field market value A, is compared with the value of the crop immediately after the disaster, which is field market value B. And here's a quick example of value loss crop suffers damage because of a hurricane. To determine whether the unit suffered an eligible loss at the time of disaster, determine the total value of inventory present for the crop on the unit immediately before and after the disaster. Some important information for aquaculture. The crop year for all aquaculture species is October 1st through September 30th. The application closing date is September 1st. So for crop year 2020, which is fixing to start October 1st. The application closing deadline is September 1st, 2019. That is the deadline to purchase coverage for 2020. So it rolls over to Monday. If it falls on a non-work day, it'll roll over to the next work day. Acreage reporting date is September 30th, which for 2020 crop year would be September 30th, 2019. You do have to report your acreage, certify your acreage, your lease before that date. Producers must also furnish their aquaculture certification, AQ card from FDACS, along with their most recent inspection report of their aquaculture facility at the time of purchasing coverage. Producers must also certify on the acreage report the physical location of acreage or area where the facility resides. Be your lease number and your lease name. Inventory records. All producers with value loss crops are required to maintain monthly inventory. These maintained monthly inventory records shall be used for spot checks and in the event a disaster occurs. Records are to be kept up to date and available to the county office within 5 days upon request. Failure to provide accurate monthly inventory records will result in ineligibility for NAP payments. Producers are responsible for providing updated inventory to the county committee immediately following an eligible loss event. The inventory after the disaster must also be verified by a loss adjuster. Inventory records must include all of the following: location, all clams, oysters, and all sizes and stages. And we also need to keep a record of when you do any plantings or harvests, or when you work them and transfer them from one container bag to another. So we need to have a running tab of any change that is for the month that is taken on your crop. And just remember that the inventory should also include all sizes and stages of a type or variety of an aquaculture species. It will be summarized as one crop for loss purposes, but all sizes and stages need to be included. Each stage or size has a separate value, but all stages are used to determine the crop loss and the value. So county offices can request these maintained monthly inventory records before the onset of every known imminent disaster. Example, a hurricane or tropical storm is approaching and may cause damage to the crop. Thus, the county office shall request the maintained monthly inventory records. Please note, hurricanes and tropical storms are just examples and shall not be used as the only known weather event to request monthly inventory records. The state office, on behalf of the state committee, also reserves the right to spot check these records at any time. The state committee did recently put into policy to make things run smoother, that producers of aquaculture should submit their inventory records, their monthly inventory records, monthly to the county office by the 10th of each month. This will prevent any I guess it will, they need to be submitted by the 10th of each month for the previous month. And I already went over, sorry, I was losing my train of thought, but we already went over what needs to be included on those inventory records. Okay, so filing a notice of loss. There is a 72-hour loss notification for NAP, and this is for hand harvested crops, which oysters, clams are hand harvested crops. At least one producer having the share in the unit must notify FSA of damage or loss through the administrative county office for the unit within 72 hours of the date damage or the loss first becomes apparent. This notification can be provided by in person, going to the county office, filing the notice of loss, which is the CCC 576. You can also email, fax, or phone. If you do notify the office of your 72-hour notification by anything other than going in person, you are still required to complete the CCC 576, which is the notice of loss form, within 15 calendar days of the date the disaster becomes apparent to you. This form should be completed in the county office, and failure to report this within 15 days will nullify any assistance available for the damaged crop. And just remember, a separate notice of loss must be filed for each weather event. So if you have multiple weather events throughout the crop year, you should be filing a notice of loss for each one of those events. Still on the filing the notice of loss section. So in the event you do file a notice of loss, you must provide records as required by the county committee to determine whether the aquaculture species are produced in an eligible facility or environment. These records include, but are not limited to, the following: leases, which you should have already included when you purchase coverage, predator control, proof of stocking levels. And just to reiterate that in the event notice of loss is filed, the inventory after the disaster must be verified by the loss adjuster. And in order to prove stocking levels, the county committees will require producers to provide copies of all clam and oyster seed receipts when you do provide your beginning inventory records at the beginning of the year. If you've participated in NAP in the past, that's usually been required. These receipts must be in the name of the insured producer. They also must include the size, quantity, amount paid, and the name and contact information of the seed supplier. So the state committee has to establish and approve natural mortality rates for aquaculture. These natural mortality rates must be calculated and subtracted from the inventory before the disaster, before establishing the field market value A. We have established, or the state committee has established, the following rates. Those are for clams. They're broke out between the 3 different categories, and then oysters is 20%. Here's an example on how to calculate natural mortality. If you have a beginning inventory value of $100,000, you multiply that by the normal mortality rate, which would result in $20,000. So your beginning inventory, which is your field market value A, which is your dollar value, would be $80,000. That's what your beginning inventory would start at. The county office will calculate the natural mortality. You submit your beginning inventory records with that value. Just to touch on clams, these are the eligible practices for NAP coverage as of now. Bag culture and bottom seeded clams and grown in the grow out stage is an approved practice in the following counties: Franklin, Manatee, Volusia, Brevard, Charlotte, and Lee. All other clam producing counties are only eligible for bag culture. Sunray, Venus clam are covered bottom seeded only in Charlotte, Franklin, Lee, and Manatee. Oysters are eligible if using the suspended long lines and or floating containers, either method. And it is approved in Bay, Brevard, Dixie, Escambia, Franklin, Levy, Santa Rosa, Volusia, and Wakulla. All right, so all our oysters have average market prices established. The state committee approved these for beginning in 2020. We've kind of broke it up into 3 different categories. I believe in the past it was any oyster less than 8 millimeters wasn't eligible. We are now insuring all oysters. I believe it's called raceways, is similar to clams when they're land-based. Okay. So anything from the size 1 millimeter to ½ inch is 0.04 cents. Anything over ½ inch to 1½ inch is 14 cents. and then the bottom would be 33 cents. And that is an average. Oysters are a graduated price crop. 50 cents is at the harvest size though?
Yes.
So this, like I said, is a graduated pricing scale. So we have to cover all the value and average the value from all the sizes of the oysters. So we have to, we took the average of 1.5 inch. Right. So if you lose oysters that are 1.5 inches, you're going to receive the 33 cent, or that is the approved price.